Hi, this is Ray Olmo, CEO for TRUST-CFO. Again, we're hitting the Zoom with the current environment. We are taking advantage of this social distancing, and my phone is always on. I'm always talking to my power partners, and what I figured out was, you know what? My clients and the people, my network and the area they're in, which is basically California, really needs to know the people that we hang out with, the power partners that we have. And so I've invested in some time, and they also have contributed their valuable time just to be real, just to have these conversations in this kind of dire straits, environment. So today I have the luxury of inviting super cool pal of mine, Jeff Verdon of Verdon Law Group. And Jeff, welcome.
Thank you, Ray. It's good to be here. Good to see you again.
Yeah,
Always enjoy my interactions with you. I always leave learning something I didn't know before I came aboard. So good to see you.
Good deal. Well, today, again, like we talk, is we're not going to get into technicalities and strategies like that. But again, I have the luxury of seeing, and you do as well, Jeff, of seeing how clients build their wealth. And that's the coolest thing about our business is, nut factories and other, and just all these people and how they make the world. And they're great at building it, by the way, but they're horrible at protecting it. And you and I have been in that vein of our responsibilities, help protect them. But also on top of getting to know these clients, I've got a super potent network. How I was introduced to you by some great people, and then you have more than doubled that up. At the end of the day, again, I'd like to kind of just understand the Jeff Verdon world. And I've gotten a taste of it, but I kind of want to dig in. We always start with, man, how did you get started in your business? You got a super successful business. How did you end up here? What was the path?
Well, I've been in it a long time, so you're really going to make me go back and dust off the cobwebs. But in my world, I started out my career as a trust and estates lawyer, doing estate planning for people here in the Orange County area. I started my career in Century City in Los Angeles, and then eventually migrated down to Orange County to join a law firm that was looking for a tax partner that a former classmate of mine had started. And in the course of my doing estate planning, I was fortunate enough to be hired by a small group of doctors in the Newport Beach area who were looking to retire in 5 years. But the longest tail policy they could get to cover them for their malpractice was going to lapse 5 years post-retirement. But these doctors delivered babies for a living. So when they delivered their last baby and hung up their stethoscope, they were going to be on the hook for that child's malpractice liability until the kid reached the age of 18, which is the age of majority in California, plus the 1-year statute of limitations beyond that. So after 5 years, these docs were bare and could be sued by any of their hundreds of babies they delivered over their career, maybe thousands. So they were looking for someone to help them, build some firewall protection. Well, as a law student and a postgraduate student in tax law, we never really thought about protecting a client's assets. Our role as an estate planning lawyer is to pass wealth on to the next generation, making our clients' kids and grandkids richer. But what would happen if a client of ours got wiped out in a lawsuit? Well, the work that we did as an estate planning lawyer wouldn't be worth the paper it was written on, because their assets would be gone and there would be no estate for the estate plan to apply to.
Yeah. So was that the epiphany when you said, wow, there's this vein of asset protection that I've got to just pay attention to?
That was it. After I did that case, and by today's standards, we did a very rudimentary structure, but it got me thinking about my more important relationship. Was it to his kids and grandkids, or was it to my client? And so it took me a nanosecond to figure that one out. And we began to focus estate planning at 2 levels. The first level was protect the assets in case of a lawsuit by using whatever legal means we could. And of course, the industry has evolved over the years. And I've been fortunate enough to work with great pioneers like yourself and others who have, adopted their strategies to benefit clients. But from my perch, Ray, I have seen the train wrecks. I'm like the emergency room physician who sees the motorcyclist who came in after an accident who didn't wear his helmet.
Right.
So I have seen what can happen when people don't plan, and it's tragic. And it always falls back to, who gave them their last bit of advice. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've gotten calls from people who have been engaged or threatened with a lawsuit, and they want to come in and see me. And when you find out they have a revocable living trust, and their trust and estates lawyer never told them about all the wonderful tools in our toolbox that they could use to protect their assets, it's really tragic.
Let's talk about that, Jeff. You and I have discussed this, and before really getting our firms really syncing up over the last couple of years, I didn't realize that it is a sparse expertise. I mean, there are not a lot of asset protections. I mean, I feel like I know most of them right now. Again, thanks to guys like you and Jay Atkinson, helping our administrative firm along. But that said, is that there's not a ton of people, and I've found that the law firms that do this other planning, estate planning, business, tax, which is more commonplace, there's more competition in that. They've actually gone to you, and I know multiple firms that have said, you know what, we don't feel comfortable with this. It's outside our scope, or we don't have the ability to shore this up. And they have hired you as co-counsel to come in and assure that these things have been done right. Correct?
Well, they do that, or they refer the matter over to us. But to give you a direct example of how, I'm talking 35 years ago is when I did my first asset protection plan in 1985. So a couple of years ago, I was the luncheon speaker at the Orange County Bar Association Trust and Estates section meeting, and I was to talk on asset protection planning for lawyers. So when I was introduced to the group, and there's about 160 people that attended, so it was a pretty well attended luncheon. And before I started my remarks, I asked the audience by a show of hands, how many of you who work in the estate and trust area are regularly counseling your clients on asset protection planning? Now, I expected not a whole lot of hands to go up, but certainly 20 or 30 out of the 160. It was one lone guy in the back of the room who raised his hand. And it was stunning to me, because what that told me is 35 years later, and of course, the industry does know what asset protection planning is. It may not have known about it in 1985, but certainly knows about it today. How few law firms are having the conversation with their clients when they do their estate planning. And I think a big area of litigation that's going to arise in the future is going to be malfeasance suits against professionals who should have known or should have been in a position to advise their clients on helping them protect themselves and didn't. I mean, if you were an individual who had your living trust done by, John Smith, and then you get sued and lose everything, and you later learn that John Smith, the estate planning lawyer, knew about asset protection but didn't even bring it up during the course of your working together, I think you'd be pretty cranky and might want to go find someone like a Mark Wilson to bring a malpractice suit. So it's really tragic. But then again, it leaves us the opportunity to help these people when they need us. But I have for 35 years been preaching from the mountaintop to my industry, to my colleagues, hey guys, you got to introduce asset protection planning into the discussion. Even if the client doesn't do it, at least you've got a letter in your file that you talked about it.
Yeah. So,
asset protection planning, Ray, I don't mean to bloviate here, but I want to make one more point. Asset protection planning is like paying your auto insurance bill. You don't buy auto insurance because you expect to get into an accident. You buy it in case you get into an accident. So I tell clients, I hope this is the biggest waste of money you ever encountered in terms of your legal fees. But if you get hit with a lawsuit and you've got the structures in place, you're going to be able to get out of that lawsuit very quick and very cheap as compared to what would be the case if you didn't do it at all.
absolutely. And that's the dilemma in California. We're the number one litigious hellhole in the world, frankly. You and I understand that, but we're also the recipients of people, hey, my house burned down and now I want to go buy fire insurance. And, you and I have to deal with half the people that we can't help because it's too late, but the other half are pre-planners, and those are the successful people. So let's talk about that. I mean, I'm kind of the fox in the hen house, being that I administrate, your firm and a lot of your peers. And I'm seeing just, like from you guys, an ungodly amount, probably a quadruple amount of flow coming in the door because of this whole COVID thing, and the threat of the business owner, dealing with employees, not knowing what's going to happen, having to shut doors, losing tenants, You name it. I mean, there's unlimited risk out there. And so now people have this realization. So without being a fear monger, but you and I deal with this is that when the house of cards starts falling, and now all of a sudden people realize they need to start doing the planning, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of that, but we're pretty proactive. I mean, we are an estate and trust law firm. We don't do standalone asset protection planning. We do comprehensive estate planning with asset protection. So our mantra is, hey, we hate to see our clients pay more taxes than they legally have to, because we think our families can deploy those tax dollars in more efficient, direct means. But we want to make sure our clients have an estate to retire on or one to pass on to their loved ones. And so we have to do the asset protection planning at a time when they have no expected, foreseeable, or current creditors.
Right. Well, but what you're saying is you also interweave the legacy planning. So the asset protection is not just one dimensional. You're looking at it from a family legacy standpoint. And so again, there's coordination with all that stuff. And I appreciate that. Hey, just, on that note, the reason that you're probably the benefactor of a lot of that and getting more pre-planners than others would, is because you do a lot of marketing, a lot of education. I mean, every day I think I see you posting things on LinkedIn, great value pieces. You write for Kiplinger's, and so you guys got a lot of influx. You're out there in the trenches, and I appreciate that. Hopefully, other people start to gravitate and understand, the dilemma of, that's facing our economy, our state, and then the United States in general. I want to talk to you about your family. You're out and about. I've had the luxury of meeting, having dinner with you and Wendy, your lovely wife, and she's above your pay grade, just FYI. And then, had dinner also with Adam, your son, and conversations with Ashley. What people probably don't know is that the whole Verdon clan are attorneys, the whole family. So that must make for interesting dinner conversation, huh?
I've been married, it'll be 39 years this month. I learned two things. Yes, dear, and a happy wife is a happy life.
Right.
So, no, I have two wonderful adult children, both of whom are professionals, both of whom practice law. I think being an estate planner made me a better parent because I got to see all the train wrecks from bad parenting, and it sort of refocused my direction to the kids when they were young. And so I've been very, very blessed. I come from a pretty dysfunctional family. So my basic test for raising kids was do everything my parents didn't do or do the opposite of what my parents did. But my dad was in the life insurance business. He was a financial planner and a tax geek. And
I didn't remember that.
My mother sold disability insurance for Paul Revere in the 60s. And they were such a dynamic duo together, they couldn't stay married. So they divorced when I was a teenager.
Interesting. Now, I know you and Wendy are always off in my neck of the woods. I know you got an office in, is it South San Francisco, Palo Alto, right?
We have an office in Redwood City.
Redwood City.
Just south of the airport.
Yeah. So you're always, coming up the Bay Area, and then you and Wendy take a jaunt up to Napa and enjoying the wine. Tell me about some of those wineries you've been visiting.
Ray, I've been, during the COVID, we've been kind of stuck in the house, and we've been going through our wine stash pretty pretty
like everybody.
effectively.
Wine is up. Gallo is up.
That's right. So we got to get back up there and reload. But no, I started going up to Napa when I opened up the office. I opened up the office in Redwood City, really at the advice and the suggestion of one of the founders of Google, who I was having lunch with. One of my clients up there introduced me to him. He was going through a pretty nasty divorce at the time, and he had a lot of the people in the technology world. They make their money and create their net worth first, then they get married. And they find out that they'd rather be coding than be in a marriage, and they wind up getting a divorce. And what they don't realize is when they have separate property and they get a divorce, there's an atros injunction that attaches to all property separate and community. And they can't sell or dispose of a penny of their own separate property until the divorce petition has been filed, terminating the marriage. So they're stuck in limbo And this guy had obviously a substantial block of stock, and he was very frustrated because he wasn't able to deal with it until the divorce was over. And of course, it was going on for a very long period of time. He says, we tried to find a lawyer up in the area here in Silicon Valley that knew this stuff, and we couldn't find anybody. He said, "There's not a lawyer from San Jose to South San Francisco that knows this area. Why don't you open an office?" And so I did my own independent checking, and he was right. I couldn't find a lawyer up. The closest one was an attorney in San Francisco.
Now I went to USF for a year before I went to the Harvard of the West, Chico State, and so that's my stomping ground.
Was that the prison or the university?
Well, yeah, no, that's Folsom State Prison that I was at.
Folsom.
I was at.
Okay.
So yeah, singing Johnny Cash. So no, those are my stomping grounds, and I know a lot of people down there, and it's interesting. The dynamic between Sacramento versus the Bay Area versus Orange County is totally different. Sacramento is Cowtown, government, town. They think differently. The Bay Area is old school. I mean, these people have been doing business together with multi-generations of families, and sometimes the advisors are not up to speed, and they do more, I wouldn't use the word archaic, but baseline planning. And then again, Orange County is the cusp of advanced thinking. It moves so fast, and people make so much money, and they're moving, and they're aggressive, to be frank. It's a pit bull ring down there. But out of that comes great planning ideas and the need to solve problems. And I appreciate that. I find it an exciting area.
Well, you think, every major law firm on the planet has an office in Silicon Valley, and yet nobody up there is doing asset protection planning until we open our office. And I thought, quite frankly, they'd be lined up out the door to see me once they heard I was in town. But what I came to realize is that these 25 and 30-year-old centimillionaires, walk around with jeans, t-shirts, and sandals. They don't know what money is. They have no idea the exposure they have until it's too late. So it really was all about educating the professional community, M&A lawyers, family law attorneys, CPAs, venture capital people, that there were even these kinds of techniques and strategies available to people before their hair catches on fire, so they can, plan for it.
I got to tell you a quick story, just because you totally spurned it in my head. You met a college buddy of mine. We had lunch one day. He has a successful company in the Bay Area, and I remember going in a couple of years ago, and he says, "Oh, come on in. We'll go grab a bite after, but meet my team." And he introduces me to his, global vice president of international sales, and the kid was like 26 years old. And this other person, everybody was under like 30 years old. It was mind blowing to me. And they all rode their bikes to the office, right? It was near the ballpark, Giants ballpark. And I'm just like, this is just crazy. And then we asked him, okay, well, are you going to invest in, your 401k or whatever? And every single one, no way. Why would I do that? I'm going to be a billionaire. It was crazy. Yeah. So at any rate, and I'm sure they all lived in a hovel together, and one probably in the kitchen of the apartment. But yeah, it's a different world, and that's probably why you don't get a ton of traction. But there's enough I guess pain or opportunity in California. You and I have been quite busy, and I appreciate that. And we owe you at TRUST-CFO for really helping build our firm. I mean, I got to figure we've processed at least 100 cases with you guys over the last couple of years. So thank you for that. What else? Oh, hey, I was going to ask you. You and Wendy also go on these cruises and meet a lot of people, right? You guys on these high-end cruises?
About 30 years ago, I got a call from a lawyer in my area. He was supposed to fly down to Orlando and board a cruise ship as a speaker at a financial conference. He got laryngitis and he wasn't able to go, and he was looking for somebody to desperately take his place. And he must have called 15 or 20 people in my area, nobody of whom would be able to make it. And I had not much going at the time, so I accepted the opportunity. I flew down with Wendy to Orlando, and I boarded the cruise ship. It was one of the Holland American cruise ships to sail for a week. And on board, the featured speaker was um, one of the most renowned financial people, Louis Rukeyser. My father's favorite show was Wall Street Week with Louis Rukeyser. Louis Rukeyser was an iconic figure in the investment world in those days. And after being on the cruise with Louis for 3 or 4 days, he used to love to have tea in the afternoon. And he was somebody he was a celebrity in my household, so I got to know him. And I'm sitting there one day and I said, Mr. Rukeyser, may I ask you a question? And he had this dark, deep, raspy voice. I said, you heard my presentation on estate planning. You probably have all the things that I talked about and then some, right? And he looked at me and he said, young man, my wife and I did 2 handwritten wills 25 years ago. We've never taken them out of our safe since. So here's a guy who has access to the finest minds on Wall Street and the legal community, and he has 2 handwritten wills, and that's his estate plan. And I tell that story a lot to my audiences on the cruise ships, because they think that all these hotshots on Wall Street and these big cities have done all this fancy planning, and many of them have not. But the cruise ships have been a great venue for me to talk about what we do. And so many people go on these cruises who live in very small cities and towns, very wealthy people, but they don't have access to the kinds of advisors that our clients do, like you and me, because it's hard for a specialist in a small city or town to make it. Yeah. So I do a workshop. I do 2 workshops, Ray. I do one called Estate Planning for Women Only, No Men Allowed. And that drives the men crazy, and I won't let the men in the room. And I talk to the ladies about all the challenges that they have in trying to get estate plans done in their family. And 9 out of 10 marriages, the wife is going to survive the husband. And a lot of the times you have the his, the mine, and the ours in terms of kids, and it creates a lot of complexity. So the women give me a lot of good intel. And when the guys aren't in the room, they really spill the beans. And I have a lot of very important information. I've written a book called Estate Planning for Women Only, which I give out to all the ladies. And then the ladies and I bond, and then they bring their husbands to my strategy workshop, which is called Secrets of the Filthy Rich. Now, you couldn't get a more obnoxious title, but people are curious about what the secret rich do. So it puts asses in the seats, and they come and they listen to my bloviating on 6 or 7 of the strategies that very wealthy people are employing, including
so wait, the secrets of the filthy rich is they also haven't done their estate planning.
Well, many of them haven't, or they, I tell the audiences, look, if your tax advisors did the things I'm going to teach you today, you probably would already have them. Now, on a cruise ship, you can't solicit. They will throw you off. So you have to educate. So I tell them, look, take notes on the areas that you're interested in. I'm happy to sit down with you after my presentation for coffee. We can go over this. Go back to your advisor. And if they can't help you or won't help you, then give me a call, and we're happy to help you. And that has generated a lot of opportunities for us over the years. But what I find is, particularly on these cruises, and the last maybe 10, 12 years I've been doing Crystal, which is one of the finest cruise lines in the world. You get a lot of very high-end people there, but they have little or no planning. Because look, estate planning is like going to the dentist. Nobody likes going to the dentist, or you're reminded of your mortality. But protecting your assets from lawsuits, and that will motivate people to come in and see you. Right. So we're known as an asset protection law firm, not necessarily an estate and trust law firm.
Yeah, no doubt. Again, we've gotten to know you, and we're the first brush of, when you call on us, we have to give you the analysis of here's what we can do with retirement, but it can't solve all problems. So, your objective is, Ray, tell me what the magic number is. When we exhaust that, now we need to get to the next level and do all the integrated and coordinated planning. So again, I love that you don't leave any holes unfilled.
Yours and my careers are very parallel. You saw something long ago, the private retirement statute under section 704.115 of the Civil Code of Procedure in California. And you saw that was an underutilized opportunity to help supplement somebody's retirement and provide a great deal of firewall protection in case of a lawsuit. I say most people, when their ship comes in, they're going to be at the airport. You saw the opportunity, you captured it, you created a program around it, and you're very successful. I saw the opportunity to help people protect their wealth from lawsuits. And, having a family of all lawyers, all litigators, you can understand I appreciate the exposure people have. And And lawsuits, 15 million of which are filed every year, they're not going down, they're going up. So there's always going to be a need for people like us, although it's a sad state of affairs when somebody in my specialty is able to make a decent living doing what we're doing, protecting clients' assets.
Yeah. So let's talk about the future on that note. What do you see? I mean, you again have had that long history of seeing asset protection, and it probably looks like Amazon stock, right? It's flat, and then all of a sudden just spikes up. And I think we're seeing specifically now, this is like lighting a dynamite stick, and the fuse is burning. I mean, we've anticipated that the next 12, 24 months is just, we're not going to be able to keep up, and we're planning on the growth. What do you see long-term in the future? What does that do for Verdon, Law in terms of the remainder of its, future? Give me some insights.
Sure. Well, I turned 65 last July, so I'll be 66 this July. For me, it's about the legacy. For me, it's about teaching the youngsters how to do asset protection planning properly. And, my mentor 30 some years ago was a lawyer by the name of Barry Engel, who came up with the concept of the Foreign Asset Protection Trust. I met him in 1989, a few years after I started doing domestic asset protection planning, and found that many judges don't care what the law is. They want to achieve a certain result, and they just make it happen and let the appellate courts sort it out. So Barry introduced me to this wonderful strategy called the Foreign Asset Protection Trust, which really put me on the map. And he and I enjoyed a very close relationship, a professional relationship, until we lost Barry a few years ago to pancreatic cancer. But the one thing that Barry practiced and I observed, and it's my philosophy, is it's about collaboration, not competition. So many people in our industry, as they come up with an idea, they want it all for themselves. And there's an adage in my industry: bad facts make bad law. And if you have bad facts in the asset protection world and it makes bad law, it hurts everybody. So I try to be an ambassador now, and I try to help the youngsters. I encourage them to look at our industry as a practice specialty, because there's not enough of us in it, and the law schools aren't teaching it. So you've got to get these youngsters who are smart, and they want to. It's a very interesting practice, I can tell you that. So my role is to not only run my practice and do the best work we can, but also to foster interest in younger attorneys to come into this profession and learn what we do, and carry the baton like we've done for the people behind us, and that we'll do in the future.
Yeah. So as a really critical mass point, and probably the tipping point, maybe for asset protection as a concept, you sent me an article a month ago on a case where it was warranted that asset protection is now considered a legitimate practice. Was that not the case, or how would you word that?
It was cited in a case in the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, where the court recognized that asset protection planning was a recognized legal specialty. All my career, we have been the black sheep in the legal community. In the early days, like any pioneer, I'm sure you found this with the PRTs. I certainly found it in my practice. I had to often convince a whole bunch of smart lawyers that their clients should engage in asset protection planning. And they would all these smart lawyers would have all these ways they were going to penetrate the structure and get at the assets, the structures that we would create. But then I would ask the penultimate question: are you willing to take on the attacking this structure on a contingency fee? And not a single time would they ever answer yes. Well, how much would you want as a retainer to go after these assets? And they would throw out these fantastic 7-figure fees, retainer fees that they would want, and they were really making my point for me. So we have to train these youngsters properly. We've got to nurture them. We've got to give them support and mentorships, and expand the practice, because there are not enough of us that do what we do to provide the services to the community at large. There's just too many people that need this, and not enough of us that do it.
So taking it to kind of another dimension, you and I have the great pleasure of knowing a mutual friend, Phil Wilson of Markham. He's just the most proactive CPA, let alone great guy. And we, thanks for always taking care of us at dinner. But you know, Phil's an anomaly as a CPA, but that's a whole other market that should be considering, you know, how they're going to protect their clients. Because as you and I say, hey, if we save you $1 in tax, but you get sued the next day and you lose that dollar, everything's for naught, right? So, you know, what are your thoughts about the CPA market really taking some interest and getting educated in this sector as well?
Well, other than perhaps their investment advisor, the CPA is the one that has the most contact during the year with the individual who needs asset protection, and is the person that should be having the conversation with their CPA, or rather with their client, about asset protection. So I'm delighted that by the fact that not only does Phil work for a great firm, Markham, and he does a great job running their Costa Mesa office, but Phil understands asset protection, the need for it, and he's constantly out there talking to his clients and prospects about asset protection planning, trying to get them to do something before it's too late.
And then again, the other, you just mentioned the investment advisors is, you know, they got their blinders on. They're hyper focusing on the risk management of the investment portfolio and the implications therein. But like I tell them, hey, listen, if you're managing a $10 million portfolio of your client and they get sued and they lose it all, everybody loses. The client loses that money. You no longer have the AUM to manage. I mean, it does nobody any good. So again, I just feel that everybody, our network, and again, I appreciate you've been really proactive in the marketing and education, or using the media to do this. Let's keep investing on this together and making sure that we keep the ball rolling in the right direction. So any other final thoughts for you or for you and the family are going? You know, hopefully we get back together and see each other here in July soon.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to talk about this. I don't get to do it that often other than in a professional seminar or workshop. I think there's going to be a lot of latent and delayed fallout from COVID. I think there's going to be a lot of financial devastation, legal lawsuits, legal claims being filed as a result of COVID. And you know, we've written a white paper on what business owners ought to be thinking about when it comes to this. We did this shortly after we got the lockdown. So we're going to keep preaching from the mountaintops. We want people to, you know, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, so to speak. And we want to keep our clients and prospects protected so that they don't wind up being a statistic.
Yeah. Well, on the final note, not only, you know, we're, like you said, prospects and clients, but I feel, again, we're kind of blessed in that the people that have become my clients have now become good friends. I'm having somebody come in here this afternoon that didn't know from Adam 2 years ago, and now we're best buddies. And on the flip side, you know, people that are good friends are now coming and seeking, you know, solid advice. Everybody has a need. So thanks again for giving us a purview of your personal world and your thoughts, and look forward to a great year together, hopefully with not a lot of damage, you know, for the folks that we care for.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
All right. Have a wonderful day. I'll be seeing you soon. Thanks, Jeff, for being a friend.
You bet.